The telegram arrived on a Thursday morning in September of 1883, and Hannah Grayson knew before she even opened it that her engagement to Victor Thornhill was over. She stood in the dusty street of Tombstone, Arizona, the paper trembling in her hands as she read the words that confirmed what his 3-week silence had already told her. He was not coming. He had found someone else, someone more suitable for a banker's wife back in Boston. The ring she wore felt like a shackle suddenly, and she pulled it off her finger with shaking hands, staring at the small diamond that had once represented all her hopes for the future. "Miss Grayson." The postmaster peered at her through the window, concern creasing his weathered face. "You all right there?" Hannah forced a smile that felt like broken glass in her mouth. "Fine, thank you, Mr. Henderson." She walked back to the boarding house where she had been staying for the past month, waiting for Victor to arrive so they could be married. The other women gave her pitying looks when she came in, and she realized they must have heard somehow. News traveled fast in a town like Tombstone. Mrs. Patterson, the landlady, caught her arm as she passed. "Your room's paid through the end of the week, dear. After that, I'll need to rent it out again unless you can pay." Hannah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She had exactly $12 to her name and no prospects. She had sold everything she owned to come west and meet Victor, burned every bridge back home when her family had opposed the match. Now she had nothing and nowhere to go. That night, she sat at the small desk in her room and composed letters by candlelight, reaching out to anyone she could think of who might help. Her cousin in San Francisco, an old school friend in Denver. Anyone. The first response came from her cousin Margaret 2 weeks later. Hannah's hands shook as she opened it, hope flaring in her chest. But the words were cold, formal. Margaret's husband did not think it appropriate for her to take in a woman with such questionable judgment. Perhaps if Hannah had listened to her family's concerns about Victor in the first place, she would not find herself in such circumstances. Hannah crumpled the letter and threw it across the room. The second response came from a man named Gerald Hutchinson, who had been a business associate of her father's. He said he remembered her as a little girl and would be happy to help. He owned a ranch outside of Phoenix and needed someone to keep house for him. If she would come, he would provide room and board and a small wage. It was not what she had dreamed of, but it was survival. Hannah packed her few belongings and took the stage to Phoenix, watching the desert landscape roll past with numb resignation. Gerald Hutchinson was waiting when the stage pulled into Phoenix, and Hannah's stomach sank when she saw him. He was easily 60 years old, with cold eyes and a thin smile that did not reach them. But she had no choice. She climbed down from the stage and greeted him politely. The ranch was 30 miles outside of town, isolated among the scrub and sand. Hannah tried to make the best of it, keeping his house clean and cooking his meals, but within a week, she understood what he really expected from her. "Come here, girl," he said one night after dinner, his hand reaching for her waist. Hannah stepped back, her heart pounding. "Mr. Hutchinson, I came here as a housekeeper, and I'm offering you a better position." His eyes were hard. "You think you have choices out here. You're alone. No family, no money, you need me." "I'll find something else," Hannah said, backing toward the door. He laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Where? You think anyone else will take you in? A woman with no references, no reputation. I'm doing you a favor." Hannah ran. She grabbed her bag from her room and ran out into the night, not caring where she was going, only knowing she had to get away. She walked through the darkness until she reached a small settlement where she found work washing dishes at a saloon. It lasted 3 months. The owner seemed kind enough at first, but when Hannah refused his advances, he turned mean. He cut her wages, gave her the worst jobs, made her life miserable in 100 small ways. Finally, one night he came to the small storage room where she slept and tried to force his way in. Hannah left before dawn, walking out into the desert with only the clothes on her back and $2 in her pocket. She made it to a mining camp called Silver Creek, where she found work cooking for the miners. The work was hard and the conditions were rough, but she was grateful for it. She saved every penny she could, hoping to eventually make it to California where she might find better opportunities. Then she met Duncan Lloyd. He was the foreman of the mine, a big man with broad shoulders and a ready smile. He treated her kindly, always respectful, always polite. After 2 months, he asked if he could court her. Hannah hesitated. She was not sure she could trust her judgment after Victor, not sure she wanted to risk her heart again. But Duncan was patient. He brought her small gifts, walked her home in the evenings, talked to her about his dreams of owning his own ranch someday. After 6 months, he asked her to marry him. Hannah said yes, more from exhaustion than love, but she hoped love would grow. Surely kindness and respect were better foundations than the passion she had felt for Victor, which had proven to be built on sand. They were married by the camp circuit preacher on a cold January morning in 1884. Duncan moved her into his small house at the edge of the camp, and for a few weeks, Hannah allowed herself to hope that maybe her luck had finally turned. But Duncan changed after the wedding. The kindness disappeared, replaced by coldness and criticism. Nothing Hannah did was right. The food was never good enough, the house never clean enough, her appearance never pleasing enough. He began to drink heavily, and when he drank, he became cruel. "You think you're so much better than everyone here," he said one night, his words slurred. "Coming from back east with your fancy manners. But you're nothing. Just another woman nobody wanted." Hannah lay awake that night, tears sliding silently down her face, and wondered how her life had come to this. 3 months later, Duncan loaded her belongings onto a wagon and drove her back to Tombstone. "I made a mistake," he said flatly, not even looking at her. "You're not what I thought you were. I'm taking you back where I found you." He left her standing in the street with her single bag and drove away without a backward glance. Hannah stood there as the sun beat down on her head, feeling hollow and scraped raw inside. Returned. Like faulty merchandise, like something broken and useless, she checked back into Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, using the last of her savings. The landlady's expression was carefully neutral, but Hannah could see the judgment in her eyes. She had been gone over a year and come back in worse condition than she had left. The next morning, Hannah went looking for work. She tried the hotels, the restaurants, the saloons. No one was hiring, or at least not hiring her. Word had spread somehow about her failed marriage, and people looked at her with suspicion or pity or contempt. She was sitting on a bench outside the general store, trying not to cry when she saw him. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of whiskey. He wore a battered hat and dusty clothes, and he moved with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own body. He was tying his horse to the rail when he noticed her staring and touched the brim of his hat politely. "Madam." Hannah looked away quickly, embarrassed to be caught staring, but he did not leave. Instead, he walked over and stood in front of her, his shadow falling across her lap. "You look like you could use some help," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like whiskey felt going down. Hannah looked up at him, squinting against the sun. "I'm fine, thank you. You don't look fine. You look like someone who's carrying the weight of the world and about to collapse under it." He studied her face. "When did you last eat?" Hannah could not remember. "Yesterday, the day before." She had been rationing her few remaining dollars, and food had seemed less important than keeping a roof over her head. The cowboy seemed to take her silence as an answer. Come on, I'll buy you lunch. I don't need charity, Hannah said, but her voice lacked conviction. It's not charity. It's basic human decency. He held out his hand. I'm Thomas Parker. Most folks call me Tom. Hannah hesitated, then took his hand. His grip was warm and calloused and steady. Hannah Grayson. Pleasure to meet you, Hannah Grayson. Now let's get some food in you before you faint dead away in this heat. He led her to a small restaurant, one of the nicer ones in town. The owner greeted Tom warmly, which told Hannah he was well known here. They sat at a table by the window, and Tom ordered enough food for 3 people. I can't eat all that, Hannah protested. Then eat what you can and we'll wrap up the rest for later. Tom leaned back in his chair, studying her with those whiskey-colored eyes. So what brings you to Tombstone, Hannah Grayson? The whole sad story came pouring out. Victor's rejection. Gerald Hutchinson's unwanted advances. The saloon owner's cruelty. Duncan's coldness and the humiliation of being returned like unwanted goods. She had not meant to tell him everything, but something about Tom's steady presence and genuine interest opened a floodgate inside her. When she finished, Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "They were all fools." Hannah blinked. "What, those men? Every single one of them, fools to let you go." Tom leaned forward, his expression serious. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone strong. Strong enough to cross the country alone to meet a man. Strong enough to survive when he abandoned you. Strong enough to keep trying, keep fighting, even when everything went wrong. That takes courage, Hannah. Real courage." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes before she could stop them. No one had said anything like that to her in so long. Everyone else had looked at her like she was damaged or foolish or both. "I don't feel strong," she whispered. "I feel broken." "Being broken and being defeated are 2 different things," Tom said. "You're still here. You're still standing. That counts for something." The food arrived and they ate in comfortable silence. Hannah discovered she was ravenous, and Tom smiled as she cleared her plate and started on a second helping. "That's better," he said. "Got some color back in your cheeks." After lunch, Tom walked her back to the boarding house. At the door, he hesitated. "I know this might seem forward and you can tell me to go to hell if you want, but I have a proposition for you." Hannah tensed, waiting for whatever inappropriate offer was coming. They all made offers eventually. But Tom surprised her. "I have a ranch about 20 miles from here. Small operation, just me and a couple of hands. I need someone to cook for the crew and keep the house. Room and board included, plus fair wages. It's honest work, and I promise you'll be treated with respect. You'd have your own room with a lock on the door, and any man who bothers you answers to me." "Interested?" Hannah stared at him. "Why would you offer that? You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you're honest, because you could have let me think better of you, but you told me the truth about everything. I know you're hard-working because you kept finding jobs even when things were terrible, and I know you deserve a chance." Tom met her eyes. "Sometimes people just need someone to believe in them. Consider this me believing in you." Hannah felt something crack open in her chest, some hard protective shell she had built around her heart. "I don't know what to say. Say yes. Or say you need time to think about it. But don't say no just because you're scared." "I'm terrified," Hannah admitted. "Good. That means you're smart. But being terrified and doing it anyway, that's bravery." Tom touched his hat brim. "I'll be at the livery tomorrow morning at 8 if you decide to take me up on it. No pressure either way." He walked away, and Hannah stood on the boarding house steps watching him go. She felt dizzy and off balance, like the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. That night, she barely slept. Every instinct told her to be suspicious, to protect herself, to assume the worst. But there had been something in Tom's eyes, something genuine and kind, that made her want to take the risk. At 7:30 the next morning, Hannah packed her bag and went to the livery. Tom was already there, checking his horse's tack. When he saw her, his face broke into a wide smile that transformed his whole face. "I was hoping you'd come," he said. "I'm still terrified," Hannah told him. "That's all right. I'll be terrified enough for both of us if it makes you feel better." She laughed, surprising herself. She could not remember the last time she had laughed. The ride to Tom's ranch took 3 hours. He kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling her about the land, the cattle, the 2 hands who worked for him. Their names were Miguel and Joseph, both good men, he said, respectful and hard-working. "Miguel's been with me for 5 years, Tom said. Helped me build the place from nothing. Joseph's newer, only been here about 6 months, but he's reliable. Both of them will treat you right, or they'll find themselves looking for new work real quick." The ranch appeared as they crested a small rise. It was not large, but it was well maintained. The house was small but sturdy, built of adobe with a covered porch. There was a barn, a corral, and a few outbuildings. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the blue sky. "It's not much," Tom said, almost apologetically, "but it's home." "It's beautiful," Hannah said, and meant it. Miguel and Joseph came out to greet them, both tipping their hats politely when Tom introduced Hannah as the new cook. They helped carry her bag inside while Tom showed her around. The house was simply furnished but clean. There were 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, and a kitchen. Tom showed her to the smaller bedroom. "This is yours," he said. "There's a lock on the door like I promised. I'm in the other room, but you don't have to worry. I meant what I said about respect." Hannah looked at the room. It had a real bed with a quilt, a washstand, a small dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was the nicest room she had had in over a year. "Thank you," she said softly. Tom showed her the kitchen and the supplies. "I'll leave you to get settled. No rush on dinner, cook when you're ready. We're not picky eaters, just hungry ones." He left her alone, and Hannah stood in the middle of the kitchen, feeling strange and unmoored. This was too good. Something had to go wrong. It always went wrong. But as the days passed, nothing went wrong. Tom was exactly what he had promised to be: respectful, kind, fair. He paid her at the end of the first week, the same amount he had promised, and did not make any inappropriate advances or suggestions. Miguel and Joseph were equally respectful, always polite, always grateful for the meals she prepared. Hannah slowly began to relax. She cooked 3 meals a day for the men, kept the house clean, and tended a small vegetable garden behind the house. The work was hard but satisfying. She fell into bed exhausted each night and slept deeply, dreamlessly. Tom often sat with her in the evenings after dinner while Miguel and Joseph retired to the bunkhouse. He would help her wash dishes, which surprised her. She had never known a man who would do such work. "My mother raised me right," he said with a grin when she commented on it. "Said a man who thought himself too good to wash a dish was too sorry to be worth much." They talked while they worked. Tom told her about growing up in Texas, about coming to Arizona to make his own way, about the years of hard work it had taken to build his ranch. Hannah found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about her childhood, her dreams, her fears. "Did you love him?" Tom asked one night, weeks after she had arrived. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "That first man, Victor." Hannah considered the question. "I thought I did, but looking back, I think I loved the idea of him more than the reality. He represented escape, adventure, a new life. I was so eager to leave home and my overbearing parents that I did not really see him clearly. And the others, Gerald I never loved, I was just desperate, and Duncan." She trailed off. "I wanted to love Duncan, I tried." but he never let me close enough to really know him. After we married, he built walls around himself and pushed me away." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? I was married once." Hannah turned to look at him, surprised. Her name was Sarah. "We married young, both barely 20. She was beautiful and spirited, and I loved her more than I thought possible." Tom's voice was soft, distant. "She died of fever 2 years after we married. That was 7 years ago now." "I'm so sorry," Hannah said. "Me too." Took me a long time to be able to talk about her without feeling like I was being ripped in half. But time helps. And I realized that loving her and losing her did not mean I could never love again. It just meant I had to be brave enough to try. He looked at Hannah then, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I see you building walls, Hannah, protecting yourself, and I understand why, but I also want you to know that not everyone will hurt you. Some people are worth the risk." Hannah's heart was pounding. She knew what he was saying, what he was offering, but she was not sure she was ready. She had been hurt too many times, trusted too many wrong people. "I need time," she whispered. "Take all the time you need," Tom said. "I'm not going anywhere." The weeks turned into months. Summer faded into fall, and the desert landscape transformed with subtle shifts in color and light. Hannah found herself growing comfortable at the ranch, settling into the rhythm of life there. She learned to read the sky for signs of weather, to tell the difference between the various plants that grew in the scrubbed landscape, to understand the moods of the cattle. Tom taught her to ride, patient and encouraging when she was nervous. They would go out together in the evening sometimes, riding through the desert as the sun set. He showed her hidden springs and ancient rock formations, shared the secret beautiful places that he loved. Hannah felt herself falling for him slowly, inevitably, like water flowing downhill. But she was still afraid. Every time she thought about opening her heart again, memories of Victor's rejection, Duncan's cruelty, and her own poor judgment held her back. One evening in October, a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was well-dressed, clearly prosperous, and he asked to speak with Tom. Hannah watched from the kitchen window as they talked, saw Tom's expression grow stormy. When Tom came back inside, he was angry in a way she had never seen. "That was Richard Sutton," he said tersely. "Owns the big ranch east of here. He wants to buy my land. Made me what he called a generous offer." "Are you going to sell?" Hannah asked, her heart sinking. "Hell no. This is my home. I built this place with my own hands, but Sutton's not the kind of man who takes no for an answer gracefully." Tom ran a hand through his hair. "I've heard stories about him. When he wants something, he usually finds a way to get it one way or another. What will you do? Keep saying no? Hope he gets tired and moves on?" But Tom looked worried. Over the next few weeks, small things began to go wrong at the ranch. Fences would be cut in the night, letting cattle wander. Equipment would be damaged. Supplies would go missing. Tom suspected Sutton was behind it, trying to make life difficult enough that he would agree to sell. Hannah watched Tom work himself to exhaustion trying to keep up with the sabotage. She helped where she could, but there was only so much she could do. Miguel and Joseph worked just as hard, all of them determined not to let Sutton win. One night, Hannah woke to the smell of smoke. She ran outside to find the barn on fire, flames licking up the walls. Tom and the hands were already there with buckets, fighting desperately to save the structure and the horses inside. Hannah joined them, hauling water until her arms ached and her lungs burned from the smoke. They managed to get the horses out and contain the fire before it spread, but the barn was badly damaged. Tom stood looking at the smoldering ruins, his face black with soot and tight with anger. "This has to stop," he said. "Someone could have been killed." The next morning, Tom rode into town to speak with the sheriff. He came back looking grim. Sheriff says without proof, there's nothing he can do, and Sutton has half the town in his pocket anyway. I'm on my own. You're not on your own, Hannah said firmly. We're with you, all of us. Tom looked at her and something in his expression softened. Thank you. That night he asked her to walk with him. They went out past the corrals up a small hill that overlooked the ranch. The moon was full, casting silver light across the desert. Hannah, there's something I need to say. Tom took her hands in his. These past months with you here have been the happiest I've had in years. You've brought light back into this place, into my life. And I know you've been hurt, and I know you're scared, but I have to tell you how I feel. Hannah's heart was racing. I love you, Tom said simply. I think I started falling for you that first day in Tombstone when you looked at me like you were afraid to hope for anything good. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love the way you hum when you cook and the way you smile at the sunrise. I love everything about you, Hannah Grayson, and I want you to stay here not as my cook but as my wife. Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks. Tom, I don't know if I can be what you need. You already are. You're exactly what I need, exactly who I want. He wiped her tears with his thumb. I know you're scared, but I'm asking you to be brave one more time. Take a chance on me, on us. I promise I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. Hannah looked at him, this good man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who had given her a chance when no one else would, who looked at her like she was something precious and valuable. And she realized that fear had controlled her for too long. She was tired of running, tired of protecting herself, tired of being alone. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Tom let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. When he set her down, he kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. Hannah kissed him back, feeling something break open inside her, all the walls she had built crumbling away. When they walked back to the house, hand in hand, Miguel and Joseph were waiting on the porch, grinning. About time, boss, Miguel called out. We were starting to think you'd never ask her. Everyone laughed, and Hannah felt happiness bubble up inside her, bright and effervescent and real. They were married 2 weeks later by the same circuit preacher who had married Hannah and Duncan, which felt like closing some kind of circle. But everything else was different. Tom looked at her like she was the sun and moon combined, held her hand throughout the ceremony, and kissed her when the preacher pronounced them married with such joy and tenderness that Hannah felt tears stream down her face. Miguel and Joseph hosted a small celebration at the ranch, and some of the neighboring ranchers came, the ones who were not in Sutton's sphere of influence. They danced in the yard, and Hannah felt lighter than she had in years. That night, Tom carried her over the threshold of their home. She had moved her things into his bedroom, the one that would now be theirs. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. I love you, he said. I will say that every day for the rest of our lives until you believe it down to your bones. I love you too, Hannah said, and realized it was true. Completely, wholly true. She loved this man who had seen her at her lowest and believed in her anyway. They made love slowly, tenderly, and Hannah felt herself letting go of all the fear and pain she had been carrying. In Tom's arms, she felt safe and cherished and home. The next morning, Richard Sutton showed up at the ranch. Tom went out to meet him, and Hannah stood on the porch watching. I heard you got married, Sutton said. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it. Congratulations. Thank you, Tom said evenly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. I want to make you one final offer for your land, Parker. Triple my original price. That's more than generous. And my answer is still no. This is my home, my wife's home. We're not selling. Sutton's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. I always get what I want one way or another. Is that a threat? Tom's voice had gone quiet and dangerous. "It's a fact. Think about it. Think about what you're risking." Sutton's eyes flickered to Hannah. "What you're asking her to risk." He rode away, leaving a sense of unease in his wake. "He's not going to give up," Hannah said as Tom came back to the porch. "I know, but neither are we." Tom put his arm around her. "We'll figure it out together." Over the next weeks, the harassment intensified. More fences were cut. 2 cattle were found dead, poisoned. Someone took shots at Tom while he was riding the boundary of his property, though thankfully they missed. Tom brought in extra hands to patrol at night. He bought a good dog from a rancher who bred them, a big shepherd mix who was fiercely protective and would bark at any unfamiliar presence. Hannah learned to shoot, practicing with Tom's rifle until she could hit what she aimed at. She hated the necessity of it, but she would not be helpless if trouble came. One night in December, Hannah woke to the dog barking furiously. She and Tom rushed outside to find 4 men on horseback, torches in their hands, clearly intending to set fire to the house. But they had not counted on the dog or on Tom being so well prepared. He fired a warning shot over their heads, and the men wheeled their horses and rode off into the darkness. "We can't keep living like this," Hannah said, shaking with adrenaline. "This is insane." "I know." Tom looked haggard, worn down by the constant vigilance. "But I don't know what else to do. If I sell, Sutton wins. He'll just do this to someone else." The next morning, an unexpected ally arrived. Sheriff Douglas from the county seat rode up to the ranch with 2 deputies. He was older than the Tombstone sheriff, with steel gray hair and hard eyes. "Mr. Parker, I'm here to investigate reports of harassment and attempted arson. Mind if I ask you some questions?" Hannah made coffee while Tom told the sheriff everything that had happened. Sheriff Douglas listened carefully, taking notes. "I've been hearing stories about Richard Sutton for a while now," he said when Tom finished. "Problem is, he's careful, never gets his own hands dirty, hard to prove anything." "So he just gets away with it?" Tom asked, frustrated. "I didn't say that. I said it's hard to prove, but not impossible." The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to leave my deputies here for a few days. If anything else happens, we'll have official witnesses. Sometimes that's enough to make men like Sutton back off. They don't like scrutiny." True to his word, the sheriff left his deputies at the ranch. For 3 nights, nothing happened. On the 4th night, Hannah was in the kitchen when she heard voices outside. She looked out to see the deputies standing with another man, someone she did not recognize. Tom came in a few minutes later, grinning. They caught one of Sutton's men trying to cut the fence. He's singing like a bird, telling them everything. Sutton hired him and 3 others to harass us, offered them good money to make life difficult enough that I'd want to sell. "Will the sheriff arrest Sutton?" Hannah asked. "He's riding out there now. Don't know if it'll stick in court, but at least there'll be a public accusation. That might be enough to hurt Sutton's reputation, make him back off." It was. Within a week, word had spread throughout the county about Sutton's tactics. Several other small ranchers came forward with similar stories. Sutton was not arrested. His lawyers were too good for that, but the social consequences were severe. People who had respected him before now avoided him. Business deals fell through. His reputation was tarnished, and the harassment at Tom's ranch stopped. Hannah watched Tom slowly relax over the following weeks, the tension leaving his shoulders, the smile returning to his face. They settled into married life, learning each other's rhythms and habits, building a life together. Winter brought cold nights and occasional snow. Hannah loved sitting by the fire with Tom in the evenings, his arm around her shoulders, talking about their plans for the ranch and their future. One night in February, she told him she was pregnant. Tom's face went through a series of expressions so fast she almost laughed. Shock, then joy, then fear, then joy again. A baby, we're having a baby. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. Hannah, that's wonderful. You're not worried? She asked. She had been terrified to tell him, afraid it was too soon, afraid of all the things that could go wrong. Of course I'm worried. I'm terrified, but I'm also happier than I've ever been. He kissed her softly. We're going to be parents. The pregnancy was not easy. Hannah was sick for the first few months, could barely keep food down. Tom was endlessly patient, bringing her water and crackers, sitting with her when the nausea was bad, never complaining when she could not do her usual work. Miguel's wife, Rosa, who lived in town, came to stay at the ranch for the last month of the pregnancy. She taught Hannah what to expect, helped prepare clothes and blankets for the baby, and generally made her feel less terrified of the whole process. The baby came in late September, nearly 2 years after Hannah had first arrived in Tombstone. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Hannah was certain she was going to die. But Rosa was there, calm and capable, and Tom held her hand through it all, whispering encouragement and love. When she finally heard the baby cry, Hannah burst into tears of relief and joy. It's a boy, Rosa said, placing the tiny bundle in Hannah's arms. Hannah looked down at her son, at his tiny perfect face and miniature fingers, and felt her heart expand impossibly large. Tom knelt beside the bed, his eyes wet with tears, and touched the baby's head with one gentle finger. He's beautiful, Tom whispered. He's perfect. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for this gift. They named him James Thomas Parker, after Tom's father and himself. Jamie, they called him. He was a healthy baby with a good set of lungs and his father's brown eyes. Tom was a devoted father, getting up in the night to bring Jamie to Hannah for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with the baby when he was fussy. Hannah fell even more deeply in love with her husband, watching him with their son. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Tom expanded the herd, built a new barn to replace the one that had been damaged, and added on to the house, creating more bedrooms for their growing family, because there were more children. A daughter they named Margaret Rose came 2 years after Jamie. Then another son, William, 2 years after that. The house filled with noise and laughter and chaos, and Hannah had never been happier. She thought sometimes about those dark days in Tombstone, about Victor and Gerald and Duncan, about being returned like something broken and worthless. She thought about how close she had come to giving up entirely. And then she looked at Tom, at their children, at the life they had built together, and she was grateful. Grateful for every hard moment that had led her to him, grateful that she had been brave enough to take one more chance, grateful that he had seen something in her worth believing in. One evening when Jamie was 5, Margaret was 3, and William was just a year old, the whole family sat on the porch watching the sunset. Jamie was explaining something very important about horses to his father, using grand gestures and serious expressions. Margaret was singing to herself, making up nonsense words. William was drowsing in Hannah's arms. Tom caught Hannah's eye and smiled, that same smile that had made her heart flutter from the first day she met him. He reached over and took her free hand, lacing their fingers together. Happy? He asked quietly. Hannah looked at their children, at the home they had created, at the mountains painted gold in the evening light. She thought about the long road that had brought her here, all the pain and fear and struggle. And she thought about how none of it mattered now, because it had all been worth it to end up here in this moment with this man and these children. So happy, she said. More than I ever thought possible. Tom lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. Good, because this is just the beginning. We've got a whole lifetime ahead of us. And they did. They grew old together on that ranch, watched their children grow up and have children of their own. They faced challenges and sorrows as all couples do, but they faced them together, and that made all the difference. Hannah never forgot those men who had rejected her, returned her, made her feel worthless. But she did not hate them anymore. In a strange way, she was grateful to them. If Victor had not broken their engagement, if Gerald and Duncan had treated her better, she never would have been sitting in Tombstone that day, lost and desperate, when Tom Parker walked into her life. Those men had been fools, just as Tom had said. Fools to let her go. But their foolishness had been her blessing, because it had brought her to the one man who truly saw her worth, who loved her not despite her scars, but in a way that helped them heal. Tom built her a garden behind the house, a big one with flowers and vegetables and a stone bench in the shade. Hannah spent hours there over the years, her hands in the earth, watching things grow. It reminded her that broken things could be mended, that things which seemed dead could bloom again, that hope was never truly lost. Their eldest son, Jamie, grew up to be a rancher like his father, taking over the operation as Tom grew older. He married a kind girl from town named Ellen, and they had 4 children who called Tom and Hannah Grandma and Grandpa, and filled the house with energy and noise on Sunday visits. Margaret became a teacher, opening a small school in Tombstone. She never married, claiming she was too busy with her students, though Hannah suspected there was a heartbreak somewhere in her past that she never talked about. But she was happy in her life, and that was what mattered. William was the adventurous one, leaving Arizona to see the world. He sent letters from California and Oregon and even Alaska, full of wild stories and descriptions of amazing things he had seen. Eventually, he settled in Colorado, married a widow with 2 children, and became a deputy sheriff in a small mountain town. Hannah was proud of all of them, these people she and Tom had raised, who had grown into good and capable adults. On quiet evenings, she and Tom would sit on the porch as they had done for decades, and talk about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and the land and their long shared life. One evening in early spring, when Hannah was 52 and Tom was 54, they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink and gold. Tom's hair had gone gray and he moved a bit slower than he used to, but his eyes were still the same whiskey color, still looked at Hannah with the same love they had held 30 years before. "You ever regret it?" Tom asked. "Marrying me, I mean. Staying here instead of going to California or back east or anywhere else?" Hannah looked at him in surprise. "Never, not once. Why would you even ask that?" "I don't know. I guess I just want to make sure you're happy, that I've given you the life you deserved." Hannah took his weathered hand in hers. "Tom Parker, you have given me everything. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a home when I was lost. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a family and a life more beautiful than anything I ever dreamed of." I could not be more grateful or more blessed. Tom's eyes were suspiciously bright. "I'm the lucky one, Hannah. That day I saw you in Tombstone, sitting on that bench looking so sad and lost, something told me to talk to you. Best decision I ever made." "We were both lucky," Hannah said. "Lucky to find each other, lucky to have this." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The sounds of the ranch drifted around them, cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in the corral, a coyote calling somewhere in the hills. Home sounds, safe sounds. Hannah thought about the girl she had been when she first came to Arizona, so young and naive and full of foolish dreams. She thought about the broken woman she had become after those dreams shattered, after being rejected and used and returned like something worthless. And she thought about the woman she was now, healed and whole and loved, surrounded by family and rooted deep in this land she had come to call home. Life had not turned out anything like she had planned. It had been harder, more painful, more complicated, but it had also been so much better. Because she had found Tom, or he had found her, and together they had built something real and lasting and true. The years continued to pass, bringing joy and sorrow in equal measure. Tom's health began to fail when he was 60, his heart growing weak. Hannah nursed him through it, just as he had cared for her through 3 difficult pregnancies and various illnesses over the years. They had promised to care for each other in sickness and health, and Hannah took that promise seriously. On Tom's 62nd birthday, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, he took Hannah's hand and said, "Thank you for every single day." Hannah kissed him, not caring that everyone was watching. "Thank you for choosing me." "Best choice I ever made," Tom said, just as he had said 1,000 times before. And just like always, it made Hannah's heart swell with love. Tom lived another 3 years, dying peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night with Hannah beside him. She held his hand and felt his spirit leave, and though her heart broke, she was grateful. Grateful for every moment they had shared, every laugh and tear and ordinary day. Grateful that he had been hers and she had been his. At the funeral, Jamie stood up to speak about his father. He talked about Tom's kindness and strength, his dedication to family and land, his unwavering integrity. And then he said something that made Hannah start crying all over again. "My father used to tell me that meeting my mother was the best thing that ever happened to him." He said she had been hurt by life and by foolish men who did not know what they had, and that he felt blessed every day that those men were stupid enough to let her go. He said it made room for him to love her the way she deserved to be loved. Jamie's voice cracked with emotion. "And I think he succeeded. I never saw 2 people more in love than my parents. They showed us all what real love looks like." Hannah wept, missing Tom so much it felt like a physical wound, but she was also grateful. So grateful for the life they had shared, the love they had built, the family they had created. She lived another 15 years after Tom died, long enough to meet her great-grandchildren, long enough to see the ranch continue to prosper under Jamie's management, long enough to know that everything she and Tom had built would endure. And when her time finally came, when she closed her eyes for the last time at the age of 80, her last thought was of Tom. She could almost see him waiting for her, that familiar smile on his face, his hand outstretched to take hers one more time. She was buried next to him on a hill overlooking the ranch, just as they had planned. Their headstone was simple: Thomas Parker and Hannah Parker. Beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents, together forever. And on summer evenings, when the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, people said you could sometimes see 2 figures sitting on that hill, hand in hand, watching over the land they had loved and the family they had raised. Just a story, perhaps, but a beautiful one. Because some love stories do not end with death. Some love stories are so powerful, so true, that they echo through the years, inspiring everyone who hears them. Tom and Hannah's love was that kind of story. A story of second chances and brave choices, of healing and hope, of one man who saw a broken woman and knew she was not broken at all, just bent. And with patience and kindness and unwavering love, he helped her straighten again. Years after Hannah's death, her great-granddaughter found a bundle of letters in the attic of the old ranch house. They were letters Hannah had written but never sent, pages and pages addressed to Victor and Gerald and Duncan, the men who had hurt her. But the letters were not angry or bitter. They were letters of forgiveness, of gratitude even, because those men's cruelty had led her to Tom. In the last letter, dated just a few months before Hannah's death, she had written, "I used to think you broke me. But now I understand that you only cracked me open, made room for something better to grow. You were all fools to let me go, just as Tom said. But I'm glad you were fools, because your foolishness was my salvation. It brought me to a man who loved me without condition, who saw my worth when I could not see it myself, who gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. So thank you in a strange way. Thank you for being fools. Thank you for letting me go. Thank you for making room for real love to find me. The great-granddaughter, reading those words by lamplight in the same house where Hannah had lived and loved and raised her family, felt tears stream down her face. It was a reminder that sometimes the worst things that happen to us are really blessings in disguise, that closed doors often lead to better open ones, that the journey matters even when it's hard. And she thought about her great-grandmother, that strong, brave woman who had endured so much and still had the courage to love again, and she felt inspired. Inspired to be brave in her own life, to take chances, to believe that love was possible even after heartbreak. That's the real legacy Hannah and Tom left behind. Not just the ranch or the family or the stories, though those mattered too, but the example of what love could be when it was real and true. The proof that second chances were possible, that broken things could be mended, that hope was never truly lost. In the end, Hannah had been right about one thing. Victor and Gerald and Duncan had all been fools. Not because Hannah was perfect or special or better than other women, but because they had not been able to see past their own selfishness to recognize a good thing when they had it. They had treated her as disposable, as less than, as not worth the effort. Tom had seen her differently. He had seen her strength and courage and worth, even when she could not see it herself. And in seeing her that way, in loving her that way, he had helped her become the woman she was always meant to be. That was the difference between being with someone who diminished you and being with someone who elevated you. Tom had elevated Hannah, and she had done the same for him. Together, they had been more than they ever could have been apart. And that kind of love, that transformative, healing, uplifting love, was rare and precious and worth every hardship it took to find it. Hannah had endured rejection and humiliation and heartbreak, but in the end, she had found something more valuable than she had ever imagined possible. She had found home, not just a place but a person. Tom had been her home, her safe harbor, her place of rest and restoration, and she had been the same for him. That was what made their love story so powerful, so enduring. It was not just passion or romance, though they had plenty of both. It was partnership and friendship and choice, renewed every single day. On quiet mornings at the ranch, when the sun is just rising and the air is cool and still, there's a feeling of peace that settles over the land. It's as if Hannah and Tom's love has seeped into the very soil, blessing it, making it holy. The people who live there now, Jamie's grandchildren and great-grandchildren, feel it even if they do not fully understand it. They feel blessed. They feel protected. They feel loved. And maybe that's what heaven really is. Not some far-off place in the clouds, but the love we leave behind, the good we do, the lives we touch. Maybe Hannah and Tom's heaven was right there in the land they loved, in the family they created, in the legacy of hope and courage they left behind. Because they proved something important, that it's never too late for a second chance, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, that the right person at the right time can change everything. Hannah had been returned by 3 different men, rejected and dismissed and treated as worthless. But Tom had looked at her and seen treasure. He had told her those men were fools, and he had spent the rest of his life proving it to her. And in the end, that's what love really is. Not just words or feelings, but actions. The daily choice to show up, to care, to see the best in someone even when they can't see it in themselves. Tom had done that for Hannah, and she had done it for him, and together they had built a love that lasted not just a lifetime but generations. Their story became part of the fabric of the land, whispered in the wind that blew across the desert, written in the lines of the mountains, sung in the rustle of the cottonwood trees. A story of hope and healing, of second chances and brave choices, of love that conquered fear and pain and doubt. And for everyone who heard it, who knew it, who carried it in their hearts, it was a reminder that it's never too late, that love is possible, that there's always hope. No matter how broken you feel, no matter how many times you've been hurt, no matter how hopeless everything seems, there's always the possibility of a Tom Parker waiting for you somewhere, ready to look past your scars and see your worth. Hannah had been lucky enough to find hers, and she had been brave enough to take the chance when he offered it. That combination of luck and bravery had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams, a love that healed her wounds and made her whole, a home that sheltered not just her body but her heart. In the end, that's all any of us really want, to be seen, to be valued, to be loved for who we truly are. Hannah found that with Tom, and in finding it, she became not just herself but the best version of herself. The woman she was always meant to be, if only she had someone who believed in her enough to help her see it. That's the real gift Tom gave her. Not the ranch or the security or even the children, precious as those were. The real gift was believing in her when she could not believe in herself, seeing her worth when she felt worthless, loving her when she thought she was unlovable. And Hannah gave him the same gift right back. Because Tom had been broken too, hollowed out by Sarah's death, afraid to risk his heart again. Hannah had healed him just as he had healed her, given him a reason to hope again, reminded him that life was still worth living and love was still worth risking. They had saved each other. That's what the best love stories are really about. Not one person rescuing another, but two people choosing to face life together, to be stronger together than they ever could be apart, to build something beautiful out of their combined brokenness. The sun sets over the Parker Ranch just as it has every night for over a century, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink. The land endures, the family continues, and somewhere in the wind and the light and the very earth itself, Hannah and Tom's love lives on, a reminder, a promise, a hope that love is possible, that second chances are real, that fools who let go of precious things make room for wise people to claim them, that being returned, rejected, dismissed is not the end of the story but sometimes just the beginning of a better one. Hannah's story started with heartbreak and humiliation, with being unwanted and returned like faulty goods. But it ended with love and family and home, with a man who thought she hung the moon, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried her strength in their bones and her courage in their hearts. It ended, in other words, exactly as it should have, with love, with home, with happily ever after, not because life was perfect or easy, but because two people chose each other every single day and never stopped choosing. That's the kind of love worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth believing in, even when everything seems hopeless. Hannah found it. And in finding it, she became proof that fairy tales can come true, even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, even after heartbreak and loss, even when you think all hope is gone. You just have to be brave enough to take one more chance, to trust one more time, to believe that somewhere out there, there's someone who will look at you the way Tom looked at Hannah, like you're the most precious thing in the world, like loving you is the greatest privilege of their life. Those three men were fools to let Hannah go. But their foolishness was her fortune, because it led her straight into the arms of the man she was always meant to be with. And that's the truth that echoes through the years, written in stone on that hilltop grave, whispered in the wind across the desert, carried in the hearts of everyone who knows the story. Some people are fools, and some people are wise enough to recognize treasure when they see it. Tom Parker was wise, and Hannah Grayson Parker was blessed beyond measure to be loved by him. That's the end of their story. But it's also the beginning, because love like theirs never really ends. It just transforms, becoming memory and legacy and inspiration, touching lives long after the people themselves are gone. And somewhere, somehow, maybe they're still together, still holding hands, still watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold, still grateful for every single moment they had together. Forever. That's how long their love lasted, and that's how long it will be remembered, forever.